Hello, everyone. This is Edward Williams, and I'm doing my presentation on the state of gender equality. So, my first visualization is a comparison between the Gender Development Index and the Human Development Index. So, the Gender Development Index measures the discrepancies between genders in the Human Development Index and key metrics such as education, uh, healthcare, and life expectancy. So, with that in mind, there's going to be strong correlation between the two. So, countries with high gender development index or countries with high gender discrepancies will usually have low human development index scores. So, the goal is for a country to rank low and far right within this visualization. So, that's one example of a graph that I did to show comparisons between two different data sets. So the majority of my data, here's a bar graph that I did for my project. I marked it by I just put the data in the rows and columns, and I put the actual dates that I wanted to mark within the measure values. So that was from that I was able to produce the graph. But the majority of my visualizations are graphs, and they were just created by implementing longitude and latitude coordinates into the rows and columns and marking each country in respect to the values that I wanted to talk about. So the SIGI, which is an index that measures the discrepancy between social institutions within each country, it used it used five different metrics to calculate the index. So with these metrics, I just implemented them within the mark section. And one index that I really wanted to have stand out was the this discriminatory family code, and I color coded that to represent what the actual index for that specific category was for around the world. And I found out that that was pretty crucial to determining which countries were discriminatory against females or not. And countries that ranked high within that category also had low gender development index scores or high discrepancy between men and women. So what the discrimination in family code means is that women are usually just dedicated to uh, female mothers or household mothers. So basically, they take on the role of basically being a housekeeper at the home and not really being afforded the same opportunities. I wouldn't say not being afforded the same opportunities. It's just usually just looked down upon or just not common within those societies for women to take on professional roles or to pursue higher education. So that's one interesting thing that I found in relation to finding out what the state of gender equality is around the world. So with that in mind, here are some extra graphs that state that talk about the actual index scores for each country. 180 countries, but I'm not going to go through that. That's time consuming. The maps, like I said before, longitude and latitude, and marking with the values that I want to summarize. So that's pretty much the gist of my data and how I implemented it to dashboards. Um, in terms of my overall presentation, like I said before, the Gender Development Index score measures the gap between measures the gap in the Human Development Index in categories between men and women within three basic dimensions: health, knowledge, and living standards. So the GDI uses the same index, uses the same components as the Human Development Index, but it just measures discrepancies between genders. So there are going to be a lot of similarities between Human Index and Gender Development Index. And that's very evident in the next graph that I have, which shows the countries with the highest gender development index scores and the high gender development index ratios. So these countries have the greatest amount of discrimination. But what's also important is that since there is a strong relationship between GDI and HDI, these countries also have high income disparity. Well, I wouldn't say high income disparity. They're there is these countries are very impoverished. So that's one thing that really stood out for countries that ranked high in the GDI metric. So this is a graphical representation of what I just stated. Countries that ranked high in the Gender Development Index ranked low in the Human Development Index. So the goal is for a country to rank low and far right. So this is where a country wants to be. This is where a country doesn't want to be. This is equality between men and women. And the upper left is high income inequality. Not income inequality, but gender equality. So the next presentation, or the next slide, talks about the percentage of women in seats of power. So the average percentage of women in positions of power within each respective government is 24.1%. So countries with a higher percentage of women, or a higher percentage than 24.1%, show a strong female representation within their respective government, and countries with a percentage below 24.1% represents a country with weak female representation within their government. So the goal is to score above 24.1%, or at least hit that mark. And as you can see in the graph below that, a lot of countries fail in hitting that 24.1%. So these are the countries in the light blue that have the lowest. The countries in the green and the light blue have the lowest female representation within their government. And what's very interesting about this is that countries that rank low in this metric also rank low in the Gender Development Index rankings as well. One thing that also stood out to me was the fact that America actually scored lower than the global average of female participation in government, which is very interesting. Another metric that I feel is very crucial to understanding the state of gender inequality is the global female literacy rate. So this is important because it shows if women have the same access to men within their respective countries. And education is a strong sign or indicator of economic development. So it's very crucial. It's a very crucial statistic for both equality and economic development. So a lot of countries that rank low in the Gender Development Index also rank low in literacy rate for women. They scored significantly below the global average. And the graph below that, or the map below that, shows in the purple below, shows a cluster of the 4 lowest ranking female literacy rates. So like the graphs before, these countries also rank low in the Gender Development Index scores, and they are Chad, Niger, Afghanistan, South Sudan, Mali, so on and so forth. Next graph, this is a dashboard discussing the overall growth pattern of gender equality. So the first graph shows the growth of the Gender Development Index, which is growing significantly since the year 2000, and the growth of female literacy rate. So what's interesting about the female literacy rate is that there's uh, even though the actual percentage isn't increasing that much, the discrepancy between men and women isn't as large as it was before, which means that women are receiving the same education opportunities as men. Also, the yearly growth in female participation in government is growing significantly since the year 2000. And in the year 2025, it will be 25.17% females within that represent the total percentage of government seats within the entire world. So 25% is a very significant portion considering where we came from. And based on my forecast, uh, that's almost a 5% jump. So very significant growth in that realm. So another metric that I found very interesting was the workplace indicator. So the workplace indicator showcases the discrepancies between men and women when applying for jobs in the workforce, and it measures the policies and the initiatives that countries take to enforce equal opportunities between both genders in the workplace. So countries with scores of 100 have completely equality between men and women within the workforce. Countries that are ranked 100 are in the dark green that are right here. Countries that are ranked 75, which are countries right here, they have some discrimination against women in the workforce, meaning that they're not allowed to apply for certain jobs considering their gender. However, overall, considering all the jobs that are available, there is still significant opportunities for them. 50 a score of 50 in this metric means that there are significant opportunities that women lack, and there's significant discrimination. And a score of 25 means that women almost have no opportunities, and it's blatant discrimination against women within the workforce. Not surprisingly, a lot of countries that rank low in the other metrics, so the Gender Development Index, the female participation in government, and literacy rate, all those countries that rank low in those metrics also ranked below the desired score of 100 within the workplace indicator ranking as well. The only countries that didn't is Saudi Arabia and Iraq. But I'll get into that later. So my second graph, well, my second visualization within this dashboard is the SIGI, which is the Social Institutions Gender Index, and this is a measure of discrimination against women in social institutions in every country around the world. So this index takes into account social norms and practices as they relate to each respective country. So different countries have different social standards and different traditions that they abide by. So each country is going to be different. However, the overall arching theme is that countries that have the highest SIGI ranking have the highest amount of social discrimination against women. And what's very interesting about this is that the same countries that rank low in all the other previous metrics again rank low here. So let's talk about some of the metrics that the SIGI measures. So it measures discrimination of family code, physical integrity, and sun bias. The metric that I have charted here that I found was really important was the family discriminatory family code. Um, I actually discussed this early in the presentation, but it's very significant because it shows that women are usually designated to be the role of household mothers rather than having the opportunity to seek professional careers. That's a common thing that happens within countries that score high in the discriminatory family code. Also, a very pertinent issue that's actually very common around the world is that restricted physical integrity is an issue that a lot of countries have problems with. Even the United States, it actually has measures within this index in the restricted physical integrity category. So the overall goal is to have a score of 0, but the United States doesn't, which means that a lot of women are facing issues of sexual assault and rape, and these are pertinent issues that we still have to face even in our own society. With that being said, uh, though many countries do have discriminatory policies, which is evident in the SIGI rankings that I just showed you in the previous slide, my visualizations point to the fact that the discrimination gap between both genders is trending towards more equality and less discrimination overall. The main focus or the main factor that is impeding the average rate of growth around the globe is the fact that a lot of countries have strong cultural ties to religious and cultural values. These countries impede the overall percentage of growth around the world, and having cultural norms that prevent women from receiving full economic and educational liberties. And that's also evident in the last slide that I just showed you, where women have a lot of discrimination again in the workplace, and women have a lot of discrimination at home and in their actual communities. So, despite these factors, the overall arching trend is pointing toward more equality for women, even though there are a lot of things that every country has to work on in order to reach the mark of full equality between both genders. So that concludes my presentation, and thank you for listening. Goodbye.